This program is brought to you by the partners of A Rood Awakening International. Help others find truth. Support A Rood Awakening International today.
The Vatican includes a large resource library that is so rich in ancient manuscripts that even they don't know what they have. In fact, there's a literal box in the Vatican that serves as a lost and found. If a manuscript falls off the shelf from a gust of air or something like that, sometimes they simply don't know where it came from and they put it in the box. And in this box are some of the greatest biblical discoveries of all time. And we're bringing them to light for the first time ever broadcast on our new series, Lost Treasures in the Vatican. You'll see it tonight because it's the end of the sixth day, the sun is set, and this is Shabbat Night Live. Shabbat Shalom, Torah fans. Welcome to Shabbat Night Live with Michael Rood. Lost Treasure is the name of the game tonight. We are about to reveal episode 3 of Lost Treasures in the Vatican with Michael Rood and Nehemia Gordon. We also have a special guest co-host tonight. We'll introduce her in just a moment. Also, it's a brand new month. The first sliver of the renewed moon was seen earlier this week. And that means we are on the first Shabbat of the month of Iyar on the astronomically and agriculturally corrected biblical Hebrew calendar. If you have this calendar, you know that we note special events in the Messiah's ministry throughout the year on the calendar, but you'll notice that there's not much going on this month. That's because this is the period between the resurrection and the ascension. So, aside from some random appearances by the resurrected Yeshua, the disciples are simply waiting for instructions. You may remember last week that our regular co-host, Annie Reed, asked us to introduce you to our Ambassador Club coordinator, Angie Clark. And this week, she has asked us to bring on someone else who was absolutely vital to our recent Passover event, and that is our events coordinator, Allison Terry.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
I'm so excited to be here right after Passover.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of still on the Passover excitement.
Yeah, it kind of lingers for weeks.
It does.
Yeah.
I feel like it does. I feel like I'm almost still there.
So now, Allison, to give folks an idea of what you do here. So you coordinate our events, and what else do you do behind the scenes when we haven't got an event looming?
I would say I do a lot of assisting for anyone that needs anything around
All right,
here.
very good.
I'm kind of in the middle of everything.
You are,
right
you know,
now.
that's why you know everything. Anybody needs to know anything, everybody says, well, just ask Allison, because she's in contact with everyone else, so that we can keep everything moving, really.
Right.
Yeah. So now, Passover, the matzah mixer was one of the funnest things we had. That was a blast this year.
Yes.
We've had previous matzah mixers where the dough was really sticky, or the Sage ovens were almost blowing up and things like this, but it was really good this time. So tell us about your experience at the matzah mixer.
Yes, I think that's one of my favorite events at Passover. One, you get to mingle with everyone, which is a lot of fun. Two, you get to get dirty and sticky. And this year, everything was pretty smooth.
Yeah.
No burns, no sticky dough. Amazing matzah to eat, and just a really good time.
That was due to a friend we have here at the ministry called Chef Richard.
Yes.
Chef Richard is a master, and he can even make matzah taste good. So
he literally had us go out and get 100 pounds of flour for the matzah dough. Yes. And I think a gallon of oil.
Oh, goodness.
Olive oil.
So I'm assuming Costco is the place to go for this. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, Passover, the neat thing about Passover is that when folks come there, they come from all over the world, like literally. We had folks there from, I met people there from Hawaii.
Yep.
Who taught me to say it's Hawaii, properly, Hawaii. So Hawaii, and from Alaska.
Alaska, I met the family from Alaska, a few families from Alaska.
From Canada, from all points in between. I don't know if we had any folks from overseas. Did you see any this time around?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Well,
but Canada, I know, was a big one. There's a few people representing Canada.
Yeah, there's the folks that come there every year from Quebec, good friends of ours. I speak a little bit of French to them, and then that's all I know. But, but anyway, we met them, and the good thing about Passover is that everybody comes together. And what they don't realize is that sometimes they come from all these points all over the world, and then they meet there and realize that there are folks who believe what they do right in their own backyard, and they're at Passover too.
Yes, I met a lot of Ambassador Club members that said, I didn't know these people live 5 minutes from me.
Wow.
So they would connect and realize they would exchange information and numbers and realize they have someone in their backyard that believes like they do. And it was just Yehovah's way of connecting them together.
It is, isn't it? That's just the best way to explain it. There's who would know,
yes.
coming to this little event. I mean, little, we consider it big. I mean, there was over 700 people there, but in the scope of things, it's tiny.
Yes.
And to come all over points of the world and just meet with neighbors there.
Yes.
I mean, who would guess?
Yes, and have lifelong friendships that they're going home with, that they'll come back to Passover to see. Aviv fellowships are formed through Passover.
Right.
So
from some of these meetings where they say,
yes.
well, I don't feel like I can do it alone, and I don't feel like I can do it alone, but maybe we could do this together.
Yes.
And
yes.
so that was a great teaching that Matthew Hall had, by the way.
Right.
That is only available on the DVD. If you were watching and said, I didn't see that, well, that's why it's only on the DVD. But he had something called the Original Church, and how folks, what the real church was supposed to be. And really it boils down to what we've recreated as the Aviv Fellowships.
Right.
And so if you need more information on that, you can go to avivfellowships.com and you can find out all about how to start an Aviv Fellowship. Now, you were at Passover for the first time last year?
I was.
Okay.
I volunteered in the children's ministry.
Oh, right.
So I was with all
Yes.
the kids last year.
Okay.
I didn't get to see as much of the moving parts behind the scenes. But I got to enjoy all the sweet littles last year. This year, I was more behind the scenes with the actual event itself.
Yes, assisting like you do here.
Assisting,
with
yes.
absolutely everything.
Yes.
So how do you find, what do you notice as the differences between maybe coming as just a spectator and then being there behind the scenes? What were some things that you noticed? Was there anything stark that came to mind?
I would say the big thing really is our staff, how excited they are for Passover. They're like, oh, this is my favorite time of year. To hear the staff just as excited as the guest was mind-blowing and so fun. And the staff is tired and they're exhausted and they're still so excited each and every morning to do the next day at Passover.
Well, what makes it fun is everyone who comes to Passover.
Yes.
I mean, this is how much of a
Yes.
blast it is. Next year, sign up for Passover next year. It'll be at PassoverCharlotte.com. Once we have the new information there,
Yep.
you can see it there.
You don't want to miss it. You
Right.
don't want to not be there.
Yeah, and it's just, everyone's so happy there, and that makes us happy and excited. And everybody goes home and sleeps for an entire day. But that's just the way it goes, and that's Passover.
Yes.
Now, Lost Treasures in the Vatican. I don't know if you've been able to see a couple of our previous episodes. We're on episode 3 now. And this is an incredible series
Yes.
with Nehemia and Michael about how just bizarre things that are happening in this day and age, where all of a sudden, really thanks to the internet is the credit that Nehemia gives it, that all these manuscripts are being found. Because in some instances, they're having to put it up online and saying, hey, does anybody know what this is? And then folks go online and say, hey, that's the Hebrew Gospel of Luke or Mark.
Amazing.
Or yeah, it's a lot more than what we thought. It's more than
Right.
just Matthew. And in fact, one of the lost pieces we joke that they walk by and a gust of wind and one of the manuscripts falls on the ground. That literally happened, and one of those was a Hebrew version of the Revelation, which no one has seen before.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's crazy. And so, like Michael says in this series, we've been waiting hundreds of years to see these things. And in some instances, we didn't think some of these things existed.
Right.
And they do. And and people say, well, who cares if you find a Hebrew version of the Revelation? It's because it will explain things better than we ever could before, because going from Greek to English and you're losing the Hebrew context,
Right.
you're going to lose something in translation. That's what the Hebrew Matthew taught us, is that there's so much more when you find the true Hebrew version of something, because it's written from a Hebrew perspective, from a Hebrew person.
Yes.
So you can only get the whole story if you get the original Hebrew, and it looks like that's what we're getting when we look in the Vatican. Of all places, you look in the Vatican and we find these crazy things. It's unbelievable.
Well,
Anyway.
I'm excited for this one because you get Nehemia and Michael together anytime, and it's exciting, let alone when they're finding things that haven't been ever discovered or knew they were there.
And it's fun just to watch Nehemia. If he sits in the chair over here and he's hopping up and down. Can we do this next one? And Michael's calming him down, saying, wait, we gotta. he just wants to bring it all out. He's just so passionate about this stuff, and you just can't help but be excited when you see this.
Yes.
So that is available at aroodawakening.tv/lost. Now, if you missed Passover, you can get that too, like we said earlier, on DVD or Blu-ray. It's available now, and you can get it at the information at the bottom of your screen there. You'll also get 2 bonus teachings you won't see online, featuring myself and Matthew Hall. We did a couple of things there that didn't make it on air, but we put it on the DVD package so that you'd have a bit of a bonus. And speaking of bonuses, we've got 1 week left for our love gift. That is a lovely piece, isn't it?
Yes, it's beautiful. It's heavy.
Yeah, it looks, if you think, oh, that's a piece of plastic, you lift it,
No.
oh, that's no plastic.
Yeah. Yep, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And that is a Kiddush cup. Basically, for lack of a better term, maybe a communion cup, that kind of thing that you would do on Shabbat. In fact, Michael does it every week before the teaching on Shabbat Night Live. And Angie last week mentioned that she reserves her Kiddush to wait for when Michael does it on TV, and she just does it with him, as if he's in the room with her. So you can do that too. If you get Kiddush cup and saucer set. This is our love gift to you. When you donate $50 or more through our love gift means of providing funds to the ministry at monthlylovegift.com, for a gift of $50, we'll give you the new teaching there, which Allison's holding up right there, Decoding the Prophecies of Old. That is our gift to you for your donation. That is the only way to get this teaching. Michael reserves some special teachings for folks who want to support the ministry. This is his way of thanking you. That's why they're a separate thing. He wants to be this, let this be the thank you gift. And for a donation of $100 or more, you'll get the teaching, but you'll also get this beautiful cup and saucer set.
Yes.
It's wonderful. Now, we are going to talk about the testimonies that we get here sometimes.
Awesome.
There's one testimony that I wanted to bring out that we saw at Passover.
Yeah.
We talked about prayer requests last week, but a testimony that came through for someone. It just appeared on our mutual, what we call GLIP. This is a program we use between the staff to communicate with each other. And somebody received this testimony from the Passover event. Did you see it?
I did.
It was wonderful.
I did.
And they just said that they felt like anything they could provide to help Michael's message go forth was just filthy rags to them. They just didn't, as long as Michael was able to get his message out and bring the truth out that we've didn't know was even there, like the lost treasures in the Vatican, they were just happy to be a part of it.
Yes.
And we just want to say we're happy that you're a part of it too. We just want to thank you for being a part of this ministry, and we just couldn't do it without you. And just be blessed in that, and we just pray that that you would just find joy in what you see every week on Shabbat Night Live. Now, coming up next, part 3 of our Lost Treasures in the Vatican series with Michael Rood and Nehemia Gordon. You can pre-order this whole series right now, and you can share it with friends. Just go to roodawakening.tv/lost. Now, if you came to Passover, or if you watch Shabbat Night Live every week, or depend on a Rood Awakening International for teachings and information, remember that none of it happens without you, as we just mentioned. We often hear that people thank us for these things, but really we have to thank you for it. So thank you for your support. Here is one way you can support this ministry and get a really great teaching as our thanks in return. Take a look.
There is a time and a place for every prophecy to be understood. In fact, only through the Holy Spirit can we understand many prophecies that have been mysteries for thousands of years. The apostles first discovered this awakening when the Holy Spirit was poured out in the book of Acts.
Peter is going to decode David's messianic prophecies of Psalm 110 and Zechariah 14.
In Decoding the Prophecies of Old, Michael Rood explains that Yeshua cannot and will not return until the restoration of all things spoken of by the prophets, including the ability today to decipher prophecies that have been a mystery for centuries.
These prophecies that can only be understood by revelation, as Yeshua said, I will send you the Holy Spirit, which will lead you into all truth. We don't have the whole truth.
We'll give you this exclusive Love Gift teaching in April when you give a Love Gift donation of just $50.
There are things that must be fulfilled that have been spoken by the holy prophets since the beginning of time that has not yet been fulfilled.
Or with a donation of $100 or more, we'll give you the teaching, plus a silver-plated cup and saucer set with scenes of Jerusalem, a reminder of Yeshua's imminent return to the Holy City, and our responsibility to fulfill His purposes before He comes.
We have a job to do. And we have to be led by the Spirit, not only to understand these prophecies, but how they apply in our lives today.
Make your donation now, $50, $100 or more, to receive these special gifts. Get the Decoding the Prophecies of Old collection, only in April. Call or visit our website to make your love gift donation now. When Bible scholars discovered a Hebrew version of the Gospel of Matthew, it changed everything. A Hebrew gospel written by a Hebrew disciple had researchers begging the question, could there be others?
What you're about to see is what we've been waiting for centuries to have in our hands.
Michael Rood and Nehemia Gordon detail a literary revelation never seen in the history of Bible research. Lost treasures in the Vatican.
Nehemia is going to show us several manuscripts of several different books here, and this will be the first time that it has ever been seen in the outside world since these things were hidden hundreds of years ago.
Get this paradigm-shattering 4-episode teaching that is changing the understanding of the Bible itself. Plus, a controversial bonus episode banned from broadcast. Lost Treasures in the Vatican. Order now.
Here we are back with more exciting questions and answers from our Hebrew scholar, Nehemia Gordon. Nehemia, I have a question here. It says, do women still need to follow the laws of Nidah, menstruation? I would like to correct that. Do women and men still need to follow the laws? And is it okay to have marital relations on a high Sabbath?
Okay, so we're going to have an adult conversation now. So if you've got children in the room who aren't ready for this, you need to send them out for the next 10 minutes. We're going to have this is Torah, so we're talking Torah questions here. Yeah. So first of all, let me deal with the second question. Is it okay to have marital relations on a high Shabbat? There is no commandment anywhere in the Torah that would indicate that it's forbidden to have relations on Shabbat. That's just utter nonsense. If I had more time, I'd go into why some people mistakenly think that. It's just utterly ridiculous. I want to deal with the first question.
Hallelujah.
Okay.
Thank you, Jesus.
Okay. For the first question, though, is really an important one. If you believe the Torah was not done away with, if you believe Yeshua when he said, I've come not to do away with one jot or one tittle, not do away with the Torah, then you should take what the Torah says seriously.
And not add or subtract.
Not add or subtract.
The foundation there.
Right. And then I just want to quickly bring up Ezekiel chapter 18, verse 6. It really, read the whole passage in Ezekiel 18. We don't have time to go on the whole thing. But there it talks about what it is to be an ethical person. And it lists some of the key things there. And it's surprising the things it mentions. Idolatry, don't commit idolatry. Don't commit adultery. Don't take advantage of the poor. Clothe the hungry and etc., those kinds of things. And one of the things there, it says a woman during her nidah, which we'll define in a minute, don't have sex with her. Like it's right there. That's one of the key things that when Ezekiel is summarizing what the Torah is about, that's in there. You could also make the argument that in Acts 21, where it talks about sexual immorality, that is also one of the 4 key things that they were relating to the Gentiles in keeping the Torah. Because that is in...
And also the Gentiles abstaining from blood.
Right. Okay, well that's eating blood when you slaughter an animal, but specifically the sexual immorality there, that is, we know what those are from Leviticus 18 and Leviticus 20. Let's look at Leviticus 18 and 20. Those are actually prohibitions. Leviticus 18:19, it says, and thou shalt not, I'm going to use the King James.
Okay.
Because you can still figure it out from the King James. And thou shalt not approach a woman to uncover her nakedness as long as she is put apart for her uncleanness. Now the word there in Hebrew is nidah. You don't know how long she's put away for her uncleanness or what that even means until you go to Leviticus 15, which we'll get to in a minute. Leviticus 20, verse 18, if a man shall lie with a woman having her sickness, and that's just a mistranslation, it's having her period. These were Elizabethans or whatever these guys were. They couldn't have a mature conversation about these things. We're going to have it. She's having her menstruation and shall uncover her nakedness. He has discovered her fountain, that is the source of her flow, and he has uncovered the fountain of her blood, and both of them shall be cut off from among their people. This is kind of a pretty serious thing. Long story short, don't have sex with a woman during her nidah. What is the definition of nidah? We get that from Leviticus 15. From the time the woman first sees a flowing of blood of her menstruation, you count 7 days. Why am I saying this and emphasizing this? The rabbis have made one of these takanot. Say takanot. That's what I talk about in my book, The Hebrew Yeshua versus the Greek Jesus, and in the Raiders of the Lost book series. They create takanot, these man-made rules and regulations, and one of their takanot is that rather than counting 7 days from when the woman first sees blood, they say count 7 bloodless days. That's a very big difference if you are a woman of childbearing age. that could be as long as possibly 12 days or more. That's not takanot number 1. Takanot number 2 the rabbis invented is it's not just a flow of blood like we see in Leviticus 15, it's any spotting. And because of that, there are actually women in Israel who cannot conceive because they have some spot of blood, and then they've got to count 7 bloodless days of not just of a flow, but of spotting. And a woman knows when she's flowing. She knows. But if you count any spotting, and in the Talmud it says a spot even the size of a mustard seed. I mean, we're talking about OCD stuff here. We're talking about to the point where literally ultra-Orthodox Jewish women, I'm not making this up, Michael, they'll bring their underwear to the rabbi to ask the rabbi, and we're having a very adult conversation here. They ask the rabbi, is this just a regular discharge or is this menstrual blood? And the rabbi has to study what this is and look at the color and the texture. I mean, it's incredible stuff. They actually do this and they consider this a very righteous thing to do. And what they end up doing is there are women who can't conceive because they're under this ban. Now, that is the prohibition of having sex with a woman during the 7 days of her nidah, beginning with the flowing of her blood. That is a prohibition. What we're not prohibited is the rest of the things in Leviticus 15, and that's really important. I was meeting with these folks about a month ago, Michael, and they sat me down and they said, we've got a really important question that we're struggling with, this small community. And they explained that when the man has sex with his wife, he's not allowed to hug his children. And when the woman's during her nidah, her menstruation period, she's not allowed to hold her children. I said, what are you guys talking about? So what happened is they read Leviticus, and I've heard this many times, so I'm not blaming them. You wouldn't believe how many times I've heard this from people who are new to Torah and don't understand Leviticus 15 in its context.
Yeah,
so
taking it out of context. And this is why I've asked you
this is
question.
Key stuff, Michael. Mm-hmm. So Leviticus 15 has a whole bunch of rules about how you become ritually unclean, what we call in Hebrew tameh. You sit in the chair of the woman who was menstruating, all kinds of different things, you become tameh. There's no prohibition to become ritually unclean. If I sit in the chair of the woman, I become ritually unclean until evening, that's actually not a problem. There's no prohibition to become unclean. And the flip side is there's no prohibition or no requirement to remain ritually clean. This is what Yeshua is referring to when he gives the parable of the Good Samaritan. You have these priests who are coming from the temple and they see a man who's sick. They say, what if he dies on us? Then we'll become ritually unclean. Well, that's not a prohibition, number one. And number two, the only thing you'll be prevented from doing is eating the sacred things in the temple. So you'll go without lunch. You're saving a man's life. That's the point there in his account. Leviticus 15:31 is the key verse in this whole story. It ends all of these rules and regulations of Leviticus 15 with, thus shall you separate the children of Israel from their uncleanness, that they die not in their uncleanness when they defile my tabernacle that is among them. All of the rules in Leviticus 15 are about one thing. Don't go to the tabernacle after you sat in the chair that your wife sat on when she was menstruating. Don't go to the tabernacle after you had sex with your wife before washing in water and waiting till evening. If you're living in your house in the Galilee and you're not going to the temple that day, or even if you're in Jerusalem and you're not going to the temple that day, then the rest of Leviticus 15 is completely irrelevant for your daily life. The only application of Leviticus 15 is it defines that 7-day period that comes in, no pun intended, that comes in today into play in Leviticus 18 and 20. Don't have sex with a woman during nidah. Other than that, the rest of it is completely irrelevant for your daily life as long as you're not going to the temple. And if you are going to the temple, anyway, you've got to wash yourself in water and wait for yourself to be purified. That's why they found dozens of mikvahs at the entrance of the temple, because nobody could walk around in a daily life, and even in the ancient world, let alone in the modern world, and not become ritually unclean. You're going to rub against someone or touch against someone. You know, I just bump shoulders with somebody, and I could become ritually unclean. That's why just before I walk into the tabernacle, I immerse myself in the mikvah, and I come out, and I wait till sunset, and I'm clean.
Now, I have to say that there are some congregations that are prohibiting women from coming to their congregation because of this very thing, as if their congregation is the temple. This is the modern Phariseeism.
Oh, Yehovah have mercy.
It's absolutely ridiculous to treat this like it is the tabernacle or the temple, and they're not going to die. And there's, as he said, there's no prohibition against becoming ritually unclean. And certainly, we're not going to be going to the temple anytime
And can
soon.
I say one really controversial thing about those congregations, whoever they are, that prohibit women who are menstruating from going into the synagogue? That actually comes from the influence of certain Sephardic Jews who were in turn influenced by Islam, because a woman menstruating isn't allowed to go into the mosque. That's not from the Torah. There's no synagogues in the Torah. The only thing you're prohibited from doing is walking into the tabernacle if you're ritually unclean. Other than that, go about your daily life and worship the creator of the universe.
So, unless you're going into a messianic mosque, you're not prohibited, okay? And if they're treating this place like a mosque, then run as fast as you can. So, thanks, Nehemia. We've got more. Be back next week.
When Bible scholars discovered a Hebrew version of the Gospel of Matthew, it changed everything. A Hebrew gospel written by a Hebrew disciple had researchers begging the question, could there be others?
What you're about to see is what we've been waiting for centuries to have in our hands.
Michael Rood and Nehemia Gordon detail a literary revelation never seen in the history of Bible research. Lost treasures in the Vatican.
Nehemia is going to show us several manuscripts of several different books here, and this will be the first time that it has ever been seen in the outside world since these things were hidden hundreds of years ago.
Get this paradigm-shattering 4-episode teaching that is changing the understanding of the Bible itself. Plus, a controversial bonus episode banned from broadcast. Lost Treasures in the Vatican. Order now.
Whether you are an executive producer,
ambassador club member, or a faithful giver,
supporter or viewer,
thank you. We could not bring the truth of Yeshua to the world without you.
Your faithfulness is worth more than you know.
You are sowing into Yehovah's kingdom, helping reach countless souls around the world that would otherwise be lost.
And that holds eternal rewards. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for supporting A Rood Awakening International.
The composite of the gospel records tell us that before the Passover lamb was sacrificed the following morning, that Yeshua had his last supper with his disciples, in which he took bread, arton, leavened bread, and he took wine, and he said, "This represents my body, which will be broken for you. This cup represents my shed blood, which will pay for the iniquity." It is this very thing that the Melchizedek shared with Abraham. As Yeshua said, Abraham saw my day and rejoiced. And when the Melchizedek brought forth bread and wine, he shared with them about the coming of the Messiah, about his broken body, about his shed blood. And Abraham gave a tenth of everything that he owned and laid it at the feet of the Melchizedek. He saw Yeshua's day and he rejoiced. And so now, every time we do this, every Sabbath, every meal in which there's bread and wine, in which we take this and we bless the Most High. Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech ha'olam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Blessed are you, Yehovah, our Elohim, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. Yeshua said, "This is my body, which is broken for you." As often as you do it in remembrance of me. And then Yeshua took the cup, and he said, Blessed are you, Yahovah, our Elohim, King of the universe, who brings forth the fruit of the vine, the creator of the fruit of the vine. And every time we do this, we do remember his death and what he did for us until he comes. One day at the marriage supper of the Lamb, Yeshua will lift his cup and say, I have not had a drop of this, as I promised at the Last Supper. I've been waiting for you. Now, l'chaim, to life everlasting.
It was on the 10th day of the month of the Aviv that the high priest went out to the sheepfolds of Bethlehem and selected a male lamb of the first year, the most perfect lamb, for the Passover sacrifice. And that was the morning that he brought the lamb back into the city of Jerusalem and staked it on the Temple Mount for the 4-day inspection of that lamb by the nation of Israel. It was on that morning, as thousands of Yeshua's disciples were outside of the city gate and had come to Jerusalem for this very event, as Yeshua entered into the gate on that very day, they began to proclaim, Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord. Just 4 days later, as Yeshua was on the Temple Mount and telling the Pharisees and the religious leaders, you will not see me again until you say, Baruch haba b'shem Yahovah. Blessed is he that comes in the name of Yahovah. Yeshua declared the name of the Father. He, in just 2 days later, in his prayer to the Father, said, I have declared unto them thy name, and I will declare it, that the love wherewith thou hast loved me may be in them, and I in them. To unpack this beautiful revelation as Yeshua makes known the Father's name, again, we have Nehemia Gordon with us, and Nehemia is now, after more than 2 decades of research, is now going to be able to bring out to us some of the Hebrew versions of the other Gospels that have never been seen outside of the rarefied climate of the Vatican and other areas around the world where he has been investigating this. Nehemia, it is good to have you back with us.
Great to be here, Michael. Shalom.
Shalom. And this very thing about the love that Yeshua said that in declaring the name, that's where the love is going to be manifest among his disciples. This is not a new concept.
Right, well, it's amazing to me that we were looking here in John 17:26, and he's connecting there, Yeshua, declaring the name of his Father with that love. And I was looking at this before in the NIV, and I couldn't believe it. So the NIV changes the words in Greek, your name, tohonomasu, it changes your name to you. So it pulls out the name of the Father, just making it now, I have made you known. Well, that's very different. Now that name is key in, as you mentioned, his arrival in Jerusalem and the people proclaiming. And in the English Bibles, it says, blessed is you comes in the name of the Lord. But it's quite clear, no one disputes that this comes from the Psalms it's Psalm 118, verse 26, which says, Baruch haba b'shem Yehovah. Blessed is he who comes in the name of Yehovah. So if he's speaking he's speaking Hebrew in the first century, not English, he's going to say the actual name Yehovah. This is before the rabbis instituted this ban on the name. And I'm looking at this, and of course I'm looking at this as a scholar of ancient texts, and I'm saying, wow, clearly here in this historical context, he's actually speaking the name. And then for him to say in Matthew 23:39, and look at the context of Matthew 23:39 before we get to that verse. He says in 38, see, your house is left to you desolate. He's talking about the destruction of the temple in the year 70 AD. It hadn't happened yet.
And he's on the Temple Mount at that time.
So and you have that in your book, The Chronological Gospels, about that whole chronology, which is maybe less clear for Matthew, but you've worked it out. So then in verse 39, he says, for I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is the one who comes in the name of Yehovah. And his disciples are probably thinking, we just said that in your chronology. It's 2 days before or 4 days before, right? We just said it. What do you mean you won't see me again? Well, what happened in the century after that is the rabbis came along and made it forbidden to speak the name Yehovah. And so imagine if he were to arrive today in Jerusalem and the people would, let's say they recognized him as the Messiah, by rabbinical ban, they wouldn't be allowed to do this. They wouldn't be allowed to say, blessed is he who comes in the name of Yehovah. And I think that's what's happening in in John 17:26, when he says, I have made your name known and I will declare it. And that connection with love, what jumped out for me from that is something I brought in I have this teaching called 10 Rabbis Who Speak Out on the Name on my website, nehemiaswall.com. And there I bring this verse, and I'm not thinking about John 17 when I bring this verse. I'm thinking about what the rabbis are saying. It's Psalm 91:14. It says, because he has set his love upon me. And there it's talking about Israel, because Israel, or ever who loves God, right? Maybe it's just not Israel. Maybe it's anybody who's called to the God of Israel. Because he has set his love upon me, therefore will I deliver him. I will set him on high, because he has known my name. So here in the Bible, in the book of Psalms, is a connection between loving the Father, setting your love upon the Father, and knowing his name. Now, when you read this in Hebrew, what the rabbis saw here was a reference not just to the name, but the actual pronunciation of the name. And how did they see her connection to the pronunciation of the name? The word for love here is a very unusual word for love. The normal word for love in Hebrew is ahava. Like, for example, it says, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, love your neighbor as you love yourself. V'ahavta et Yehovah Elohecha, love Yehovah your God. Here it's a completely different word for love. It's the word chashak. Chashak or chashak, the rabbis understood this as an acronym that represented the pronunciation of the name. Because if you take it as an acronym, this word for love, chashak, is cholam, shva, kamatz, and those are the three vowels of the name Yehovah that was understood for the last 1,000 years and more by Jewish sources. They talk about this, that's what my 10 rabbis said. We actually talked about this in the Gentiles Shall Know My Name teaching that we did together. Now, there's a rabbi in the 12th century who ties it all together, and he doesn't know John 17:26. He's just looking at Psalms and realizing the same thing that I think Yeshua was teaching, based on Psalm 91:14. This Rabbi David Kimchi in the 12th century says, knowing the tetragrammaton, that's the four-letter name of the Father, knowing the tetragrammaton is loving God, blessed be he. And this is the greatest achievement that a person can achieve while he is still a body. And you know, I read that and I get chills that today we've been told, I was told as being raised as a Jew, that we're not allowed to speak this name, and the pronunciation of the name is a secret. And even if we know it, we must never speak it. And here we have this concept here that setting the pronunciation of God's name, that is knowing his name and loving him. It's all tied in there together. And then Yeshua says the same thing in John 17:26. I find it hard to believe this is a coincidence. There must be some connection here between, and it's all coming from Psalm 91:14, I think. Meaning like that Yeshua read this and understood what it meant, the same way that later Jews throughout the centuries understood it, that this is a reference to the pronunciation of the name. And that Yeshua would say this in the first century, I think is pretty profound. Because if Yeshua is who you believe he said he is, then he knew the temple would be destroyed. He knew the rabbis would come along 100 years later, and they would forbid people to speak the name. And he said, you ain't going to see me again. I am not coming back until you say my Father's name again, the name I made known to you, the name that I declared to my disciples. And I will make it known. I will declare it, he says in John 17:26. I mean, it all ties together. Pretty cool stuff.
There it is. The restoration of his name, yes, and the pronunciation, because that's part of the restoration.
Oh, absolutely.
This is something that has now, in this generation, this has come to pass. And it was one of your relatives that actually hit it, one of the famous rabbis.
So this is one of the things we talked about in the Gentiles Shall Know My Name series. And you know that people can still get in a DVD. Wonderful, beautiful. One of the best teachings I've ever done. I'm really appreciate that you had me here to talk about that, and you have me back to talk about these further discoveries. So at the time when I was doing that research, I knew about originally 5 manuscripts that had the full vowels Yehovah. Most places in those manuscripts you could not find the full vowels. The name was unpronounceable. The rabbis, and this is based on the rabbinical ban on the name, they don't want people speaking it, so they leave out one of the vowels. So if a Jew
and it was accidentally put in.
Yeah, but it was a slip of the scribe what we today call a Freudian slip, right? The scribe, in a sense, the scribe knew in his head how to pronounce it, and he put in the full vowels. And it happened 7 times in the Aleppo Codex, about 50 times in the Leningrad Codex, and then we found it in other manuscripts. Well, I had found these 16 rabbis who explicitly said the name was Yehovah. I want to bring one of these. And this is the one who you mentioned, who turns out he's my ancestor. He's my 11th great-grandfather. And the context here is amazing. He starts out this letter that was never supposed to be made public. Mm-hmm. He's writing to another rabbi. He says, "Know, my beloved, how extremely difficult it is to put things like this in writing, and even more so a letter sent about from place to place concerning the vowels of the Tetragrammaton, which are Shva, Cholam, Kamatz." And Shva, Cholam, Kamatz in Hebrew is Yehovah. Those are the names of the vowels.
No question about it.
No question about it. And those form the word chashak as an acronym, which is the word for love, that apparently Yeshua is making a play on words on in John 17:26. And also here we have Rabbi David Kimchi is making that connection. And he goes on in the letter. He says, and he talks about his grandfather saying the same thing. And he talks about his grandfather wrote a book. And it says, because of its immense holiness, it was never printed, that it not be used by those who are not worthy. In other words, he's writing a letter with information that he's explicitly telling you is meant to be kept secret. This is never meant to be get out to the public. Michael, this is the WikiLeaks of the 17th century. That is, these are these literally secret communiques that we now have access to. And why do we have access to them? Well, he goes on at the end of the letter. He says, "I have one request, that you hide this letter in a pure and holy place and not allow it to be passed around here and there." And the other rabbi wrote back and he said, "It's hidden in my vaults." So why do I know what it says in the letter of my 11th great-grandfather, who quotes my 13th great-grandfather, his grandfather? How do we have access to this information? Well, a couple things have happened. I mean, we live in an era where knowledge is increasing, as it says in the book of Daniel, chapter 12. And that's part of what happened. But in 1618, my 11th great-grandfather died. And his disciples went to his office, gathered up all his letters, brought him to a printing press, and printed them in a book. That in itself wasn't enough for us to know about it today. I was able to find this because scholars for the last, since the 70s, I mean, I'm bad at math, 4 decades, have been typing in letter by letter as every word of rabbinical literature. And today I can go and they haven't finished, right? They've only done 100,000 books from the last 2,000 years. But I can search those, and that's how I found this letter. From 1608, which is then printed in 1618 and then typed up sometime in the last 40 years. So I can now access this information. Imagine that. This is one page out of 100,000 books, and I was able to find it. I mean, if you look at what happened with WikiLeaks, all these emails were released. Well, releasing the emails isn't enough. How do you search them? There's tens of thousands of emails. Well, that's the beauty of the period we live in today, that we can get to this information, that it's available to the public. And I was able to find this letter, and I ended up finding 16 rabbis who explicitly said the name is Yehovah. They identified the vowels by name, Shva, Cholam, Kamatz. That formed the acronym Chashak, which is love. And then I felt a little awkward. I only had 5 Bible manuscripts with 16 rabbis. I wanted to find more Bible manuscripts. Well, this was no easy feat. I had already started this process about 6 months earlier. I knew there was a key Bible manuscript in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I got in a car, and I ended up driving across from San Antonio, Texas. And I thought, I can't just drive to Cincinnati directly. It was at the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati. I said, I've got to justify this big trip. So I ended up driving 8,000 miles, visiting different communities and speaking there. I mean, I made a whole summer of it. And part of that, as I said to the people in Cincinnati, hey, I want to, interview you for my podcast. I have a podcast called Hebrew Voices. And I want to interview you about your manuscripts. And while I'm doing the interview, I say, and can we look at the Hebrew Union College manuscript number 1? They're like, oh, well, we usually don't bring that out into the public. It's okay, we're on radio, sure. So they bring it out, and that was my number 5. That was earlier in the summer before that. Well, so I mean, imagine it. I had to go all the way to Cincinnati, drive 8,000 miles to get to number 5. How am I going to get 16 Bible manuscripts or 10 Bible manuscripts? Well, what I didn't know at the time, but I quickly discovered as I started to search, is there's this worldwide project to digitize all Hebrew manuscripts all over the world. And it's being led by 3 major institutions. One is, the first 2, honestly, I hadn't really heard of before. One is called the Polonsky Foundation. There's this benefactor named Dr. Leonard Polonsky, who contacted the Vatican and Oxford University, and he's convinced them to digitize, I guess with a large donation and grant, to digitize all of their manuscripts and make them available free to the public. And then there's also something called the Friedberg Jewish Manuscript Society. And of course, really, from my perspective, the ones who are leading this effort with their knowledge is the National Library of Israel, which has scholars who can actually look at the manuscripts from the Vatican and say, okay, this is from this century and this is, this document. They're still in the process of cataloging everything, but so these three institutions and others, the British Library was involved, and the Vatican, of course, had to agree to it, right? And the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York has put out over 1,000 Bible manuscripts. So altogether, we have an unprecedented access to manuscripts of the Bible and other sources that we'll talk about. But let's, can we get to that?
Right.
Yeah. Well,
No, we can't,
not yet. Okay.
Can't get to the Gospels yet.
So we found Hebrew Gospels. He won't let me say it. Okay. So we'll get to that. Okay. But so I was looking for the name Yehovah in these manuscripts. Now, just to give you some statistics, right? So how many manuscripts have we had access to? So we had, and this is just one subset, this isn't everything, but there's one set of manuscripts that we were able to access that was 3,547 manuscripts covering 138,322 pages. So you say, how did you get to 1,000 manuscripts? Well, we looked through like 4,000, right? That wasn't even all the manuscripts. That doesn't include the Cairo Geniza, for example, which is very difficult to quantify. There could be as many as 18,000 Bible manuscripts in the Cairo Geniza. It's difficult to quantify. So we're still searching through them, right? I mean, we're still trying to find all the sources, and it's a lot of work. But we went through about 4,000 manuscripts to get to this 1,000 that have the full vowels, between maybe 4,000 and 5,000 manuscripts. Because our find rate is about 20%, 28%, something like that. So in any event, it's not like, okay, you have 1,000 manuscripts. And I've heard this from some of the critics. They say, well, those are the vowels of the Hebrew word Adonai, which means Lord, and therefore it's in all manuscripts. Well, I can tell you it's not in all manuscripts, right? It's only in about 1 in 4 or 1 in 5. The other approximately 75%, 80% of the manuscripts do not have these full vowels, Yehovah. Why is that? Because they're under the rabbinical traditional ban of the name. They do not want us to speak that name. They do not want us to speak the words that Yeshua said in Matthew 23:39, when the Messiah comes, whoever he is, blessed is he who comes in the name of Yehovah. The rabbis want to prevent that. And you might say, wait a minute, the rabbis pray every day for the Messiah to come, right? And there's a question, will the Messiah come or come back between Jews and Christians? But the rabbis say, we do want the Messiah to come. But on some level, and I've heard rabbis say this, not publicly, but I've heard rabbis say this.
Party?
Every rabbi today is the high priest of his own little temple.
Right.
He's got his synagogue, and he's the authority there. And the Messiah shows up, whatever his name is, and all of a sudden, you're this, you're just some guy, right? So there's some resistance, and I've heard rabbis say this. I've heard them say it in their synagogues. I don't know if they would say it too publicly, but I've heard them say in their synagogues, we don't actually want the Messiah to come. And it's not because they think the Messiah is Yeshua. They don't know who the Messiah is. They're just thinking like, look, we got a good thing. Why mess with it?
Well, I would assert that back in the first century, that was the situation back then.
Oh, yeah. I mean, to some extent, that was definitely the situation. And today it's worse. Because at least then we had a high priest in the temple, right? And then the high priest is thinking, I'm God's chosen to be in the temple, the Messiah, and this is actually something we see in the book of Zechariah, I believe it's chapter 14, where it talks about there's this rivalry between the high priest and the Davidic king, and they're both anointed with oil. At least that's how Jews understand it. And it's talking about how in the end times there will be harmony between these two institutions, which then, of course, in Hebrews brings up that whole allegory of Yeshua being both positions. Mm-hmm. But in any event, there was an actual rivalry. The high priest, the temple's thinking, I was anointed with oil, which means I'm a Mashiach. You want to bring a Davidic Mashiach, a Davidic king? That's competition. I don't need that, right? I mean, this was the psychology back then, and it's still alive to some extent today. Well, so here we are. We've got these thousands of manuscripts we're searching through. We found the name as of this recording, and by the time this is broadcast, it will be out of date. As of today, we have 1,034 manuscripts with the full vowels Yehovah, including 3 manuscripts with the Babylonian pointing. I mean, we've got as definitive evidence as you could possibly want. 16 rabbis, 1,034 manuscripts. We know his name is Yehovah. While I was searching for this information, I remember, well, let me just lay the cards on the table and be honest here. So T-Bone is this gentleman who's been helping me. There's a few other people. Dawn is this woman named Dawn, and Chris Clark has been helping. I mean, these are people who are out there saying, I saw this teaching that Nehemia did with Michael, or I saw some teaching Nehemia did on his website, nehemiaswall.com. He found these manuscripts. I want to find a manuscript. Okay, I can use all the help I can get, guys. And so it takes a certain amount of training. It's not easy because a lot of little dots and dashes. And so these people have come and contacted me. And for example, this woman, Dawn, I call her part of the 100 Club. There's 3 people in the world who have found 100 or more manuscripts with the full vowels. Me, T-Bone, and Dawn. Well, T-Bone, I'm with him over the summer in Israel, and T-Bone is a believer in Yeshua. And he says, Nehemia, we have all these manuscripts of the Old Testament that we have access to now at the National Library of Israel. Are there any manuscripts of the New Testament? And I say, well,
this is what you've been holding under for 18 years
right.
now.
Well, I said,
okay.
I do know about some manuscripts of the New Testament. Maybe we should look at those too. But here, being totally honest, laying my cards on the table, that wasn't my highest priority. My highest priority, coming from an Old Testament perspective, a Tanakh perspective as a Karaite Jew, is the name of the Father, Yehovah. I want to be sure that is his name in as many sources as I can find. And look, we were looking for other pronunciations, right? I was looking for manuscripts that have Yahweh. Couldn't find any. No Hebrew Jewish manuscripts. And while we're doing this, T-Bone's kind of like, we call this in Hebrew nudnik. He's pestering me. He's this little nudnik jabbing me. New Testament, Gospels. I'm like, all right, let's open up my file from over a decade ago and see what we got. And we start pulling these things up. And one of the things that I had shared with you about, I didn't give you the details, is that I'd found a junk box in the Vatican. And the junk box in the Vatican had 4 pages from the Gospels in Hebrew, which I'm gonna save that. But before we get to that,
because I'm going to have you read it, translate it, and I'm going to have everyone out there with their pen in hand to be able to correct their Bibles, because that's exactly what I did. The very first time that I saw this in front of me, Nehemia is translating it, and I'm marking my Bible. This is what I've been waiting for 20 years to be able to do this.
Well, now before we're going to get to that, I think we'll get to that. Before we get to that, I do want to share something that I found. So this is from the British Library. It's called Royal Manuscript 16A2. Anybody can go to the library website, the website of the British Library, and see this manuscript for themselves. And you'll look on folio 24R, and you'll find the Epistle of James in Hebrew. Now, is this a Hebrew original, or was it translated from Greek? That's very difficult to say. We don't know exactly how this even got into the royal collection. Some of the sources seem to indicate it was given as a gift to King Henry VIII. What's really interesting to me about it is that the script is not a typical script that would be used by Christian scholars. This is a script that was used by Sephardic Jews, very similar to what we call Rashi script, but it has certain characteristics that you can clearly identify. There's a Sephardic Jew who wrote this. And here we have a passage, Epistle of James, chapter 1, verse 7. And what do we have here? You can see it, people. Yehovah with the vowels. The same vowels we found in 1,034 Hebrew Bible manuscripts of the Old Testament, we now find in this manuscript of the Epistle of James in Hebrew. I mean, it's incredible. I want to share another one if you'll let me here.
Let me point out something on this. James, which he says he's a servant of Yeshua the Messiah to the 12 tribes scattered abroad. Through the rest of his letter, there's nothing indicating that he's writing to believers even. He's stating that he is, but nothing else is indicative of that. And this could be that he's writing this to Jewish people in the synagogues.
In other words, any Jew, whether you believed in Yeshua as the Messiah or not, would read the Epistle of James and be like, wow, this is some great stuff, right? Other than the opening line, there's no hint anywhere that there's anything uniquely what could later be called Christian in it, right?
Absolutely.
It's a purely Jewish message. Here's another one that I've shared before. This is another manuscript in the British Library, Sloan Manuscript 237. And here you have, I love it here. He starts out saying, in the English, based on the Greek, it says, I am the Alpha and the Omega. And the Hebrew says, Ani ha'alef v'hatav. I am the Aleph and the Tav. That's the first and the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. right? Because Alpha and Omega is the first and last letter of the Greek alphabet. Omer Yehovah Elohim, says Yehovah God. And Yehovah there is with the vowels. I mean, it's quite clear here that they at least, let's say this is translated from Greek, which we don't know. If this is a Hebrew original, this is very exciting. But we can't say that 100% certain at this point. But it clearly is a Hebrew text that they understood that when it says Alpha and Omega in Hebrew, that's Ani, Aleph, and Tav, and that it talks about Lord God, that's Yehovah Elohim, which is quite clear when you study Hebrew documents. So we have these documents that are in Hebrew with New Testament, and I just can't wait till you let me share this with the people. Can I tell them what books it is yet?
No,
okay.
No, really. If you could take us back, 20 years ago, what you were having to do for these manuscripts.
Oh, wow.
And it really was, if they weren't able to get in and photograph all these manuscripts in St. Petersburg, you wouldn't have had any access to these things.
Right.
And take us back there, because what's developed lately is incredible.
Michael, I'm going to save that for the second half, because that's not a short story and it's an exciting one.
Okay. All right. Well, if we are going to save that to the second half, I'm not waiting for the second half. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the time that every week, every time this airs, no matter what century it airs, it is because we are still getting the gospel of the kingdom out to the world. We're still the cutting edge of biblical research that is going out around the world, and we need your help. We are broadcasting right now in more than 120 countries around the world at great expense. Most of the world will never have high-speed internet, and so we're getting this out through every venue that we possibly can, in English, in Spanish, in Mandarin, Chinese, and who knows what else as we continue this march. So whenever you're listening to this, we want you to stop for this 2 minutes. We want you to write a check, or however they're paying in the century that you finally hear this. If it's Bitcoins or whatever it is out there, this is the time to stand with us in helping to get the gospel of the kingdom out around the world. The light is getting darker, but the light shines brighter as everything else gets darker in the world. We need to take a stand. We need to stand together, and this is your opportunity to support this ministry, because we're still doing what Yeshua said. Get the gospel of the kingdom that he taught out to the entire world. And here is your chance to be part of the kingdom and what Yeshua commanded us to do. I may have been waiting 20 years for this revelation, what we're going to be seeing, but the Jews were waiting for more than 70 years for the walls to come down so that they could get in and to see these ancient manuscripts. Nehemia, tell us about that.
Well, what really illustrates this for me, Michael, and it's a great picture of what happened, is there was this very important collection of Jewish manuscripts in Moscow that were held by this man named Gunsberg. So the Gunsberg collection was purchased in 1917 by what later became the National Library of Israel, was at the time just the Library of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And it was being boxed up to be sent to Jerusalem. It was purchased with cash money, boxed up to be sent to Jerusalem. And what happened in 1917? The communists came to power. They hated Jews, hated Jewish history, just as they hated Christians and Christian history. These were rabid atheists, and they stuck them in a warehouse somewhere. And we waited for decades to get these manuscripts that are ours, that we paid for, and we weren't allowed to see them. Now, at the same time that these manuscripts were freezing in Moscow, the Gunsberg collection, there was another collection called the Furkovich collection, which had been collected by a Karaite Jew in the 1800s named Abraham Furkovich. He sold his manuscripts, which is the largest collection of Hebrew manuscripts in the world to this day. He sold them to what was the Russian Imperial Library and what later became the Russian National Library. So these manuscripts were known in St. Petersburg, which at one time was Leningrad, and now once again is St. Petersburg. These manuscripts were known, and scholars managed to get one Bible manuscript, which became the most important Bible manuscript in the world after the Aleppo Codex. It was called the Leningrad Codex. Well, it turns out Leningrad Codex is a bit of a misnomer because there are over 3,000 codexes of the Bible in Leningrad, in St. Petersburg. And one of the really important things that's happened with this worldwide digitization of manuscripts is I can now go to the National Library of Israel, and instead of pulling out these microfilms and swirling them, I can actually pull it up on the computer and see those manuscripts in a much more efficient way.
So how did these manuscripts then turn into microfilm to where you could access them?
So what happened is when the Soviet Union fell, the Israeli government went into full gear. They said, okay, we don't know how long it is till the next fascist regime, communist regime comes to power. And they did a couple of things. One of the things they actually did at the very same time is they sent a mission over to Ethiopia to get the final Jews they could out of Ethiopia, because when the Soviet Union fell, the communist regime in Ethiopia that was keeping the Jews hostage also fell. And they brought over tens of thousands of Jews. And so at the same time they were doing that, they said, we're going to get the manuscripts out of Ethiopia. We're going to get the Jews out of Ethiopia. Let's get the manuscripts, at least images, out of the former Soviet Union. So they sent over a mission to St. Petersburg, Russia, and they were allowed to photograph thousands of Bible manuscripts and other Hebrew and Jewish manuscripts. And those microfilms are now held at the National Library of Israel. And what happened in the last year is they took those microfilms, ran them through this infrared digitization machine so they could get high resolution images off of the microfilms. And now you can go to the National Library of Israel, and instead of pulling out a microfilm, which is very tedious and slow, you just pull it up on your computer. I remember back in the day, and this is sometime around 2003 or thereabouts, I was looking for Hebrew Matthew manuscripts, and I had a lead on one manuscript in St. Petersburg, Russia. And so I wrote it on the thing on a little piece of paper, handed it to the librarian. 15 minutes later, he comes back, he gives me this roll, and I pull it out, and I'm swirling, and I'm looking at it, and I almost shouted, Michael. Because in there I found Hebrew Matthew, but I also found in Hebrew Mark, Luke, and John. Now, at the time, I didn't know what those texts were. And today I can tell you I don't think those are Hebrew originals.
Right, and this is the first time you're telling me that you found those at that time. You told me that you found some others, but you can't say anything about it. And so I'm hearing it for the first time.
And I've never said this before publicly.
Right.
People for years have asked me, are there other Hebrew documents other than Hebrew Matthew? And I say nothing that's been published. Which means I can't talk about it. Well, now we have these. Now these have gone out to the world.
Wait! I have to ask you. you took the microfilm after you found that back to the librarian, and he asked you.
He says to me, "Did you find anything interesting?" And I've told this story before. Did you find anything interesting in that microfilm? And I'm thinking, does he know about the Hebrew Mark, Luke, and John that I saw there? And he didn't. I said to him, rather than answering, "Why are you asking that?" And he said, "Oh, because nobody has ever looked at that microfilm before." This was like sometime around the early 2000s. These microfilms have been made in 91. And so they've been sitting there for over 10 years, and no one had ever pulled out that microfilm to look at it.
And how long would it take Hebrew scholars that fluently read it, how long would it take them to look through and decipher all these things?
Many lifetimes. Just to look at them and study them would take many lifetimes.
And you found Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
In Hebrew. Now, the Matthew I was expecting to find, I certainly wasn't. And here's the really cool thing. At the end of Hebrew Matthew, and this is in just about every manuscript of Hebrew Matthew, it says, "Thus ends the Gospel of Matthew, and now shall come the Gospel of Mark." And you see that in these manuscripts, but there's no Mark. It's not there, except for in this manuscript from St. Petersburg, Russia, and it turns out another manuscript. There's two manuscripts that have that. Now, at the time I saw these, I said, I don't know if these are Hebrew originals or not, or if they're just translated from some other language. I can now tell you that they are translated from a language called Catalan, that these are two unknown copies of the Catalan Gospels that are also in the Vatican. And we actually have a mutual friend who's
Miles Jones. He was with us on the program for Shabbat Night Live. Right. A brilliant man, and he was...
well, and what he's doing is he's studying the Hebrew text of these four Gospels, his Matthew's different, of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that are translated from the Catalan language into Hebrew, and you're finding all kinds of really interesting things that... How do you explain that we see something in the Hebrew that isn't in the Greek, but it's, in this case, for a fact it's translated from Catalan, which is a dialect of Spanish. Well, until he watches this episode, Michael, even Miles Jones doesn't know about these two other manuscripts of his Catalan Gospels.
I'm thinking I was going to call him as soon as we get off. But,
probably. Okay, so...
Because I know he's very excited about this. And
he only has one manuscript from the Vatican, EBR 100. Now he's got two more manuscripts that he can use to compare and study, which is extremely important when you're studying manuscripts. He finds some really interesting things. And when I was talking to him, I sat down with him and talked with him for hours and hours and hours in, I believe it was in San Antonio or Dallas. And what came to mind as he was describing this is an article that was written by this scholar named William Darby. Darby was this guy who was really against the idea of Hebrew Matthew. Howard had come out with Hebrew Matthew, and Darby said, look, we really can't deny that there's some important readings in this Hebrew Matthew. We're finding things here we don't find anywhere else in any other Greek or Latin text.
And they solve problems that Greek scholars just boiled over for hundreds of years.
So Darby offers another very interesting solution, let's put it that way. He says, clearly this isn't, and I'm paraphrasing here, right? He says, this doesn't look like it's translated from Greek or Latin, but maybe it's translated into Hebrew, because he knows it can't be a Hebrew original, right? That's the starting point for people like Darby. It can't be a Hebrew original. So instead he proposes maybe this was translated from some old Greek or Latin text that we don't have anymore, that's closer to the original Greek, and therefore it brings us these interesting readings that we don't have in our standard Greek. In other words, it started out in Greek, was translated into Latin, and then into Hebrew, and our Hebrew that we have brings us stuff from the original text that's even now different in the Greek. It seems like a lot of steps. I mean, Occam's razor says that all things being equal, the simplest explanation is the best. In either way, even if Darby is right, that means there's immense value in these Hebrew documents. Even if they are translated from some lost Latin or Greek text, they're bringing us things we don't have in our current Latin or Greek text.
But they're still not going to explain the figures of speech that only make sense in Hebrew.
Not in Shem Tov's Hebrew Matthew, but maybe in some of the other documents. And certainly that explains in the Catalan Hebrew Gospels, meaning that can explain why we see these things in the Catalan Hebrew Gospels that Miles Jones is studying that blows you away. You look at this and you say, this makes so much more sense than what's in the Greek, and it ties into all kinds of things. So maybe they were translated into Hebrew from some lost version we don't have. Now, with all that said, can we talk about the Hebrew Revelation, Sloan 273 from the British Library? Would you let me pull that up?
Let's go to Revelation.
Okay.
This is,
Revelation
is
chapter
treasure.
1. This really is, it's one of these golden nuggets that
and I'm going to follow along with the King James here.
All right. So I'm going to start in verse 17. It says, "V'kasher ha'iti oto nafalti el raglav kemet." And when I saw him, I fell upon at his feet like a dead person. V'sam hayad yamino alai. And he
let me give you the context.
Yeah.
John, this is the revelation that John receives. He sees Yeshua in his glorified body, and he is he's wiped out. He just falls down like a dead man at his feet. There's no strength in him.
Vayomer, and he said, and I guess Yeshua is speaking here from the context, Al tira ani harishon v'acharon. Do not be afraid or do not fear. I am the first and the last. Ve'achai v'ha'iti met. And the one who lives, and I was dead.
The first and the last?
That's what it says.
Yeah.
Do you have something different?
No, I was just,
okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay. I was dead and I'm alive and was dead. V'hinei chai ani le'olmei olamim, and I live forever. Behold, I live forever. Amen. And he says, V'yesh li et hamasmirim hamavet v'asheol. And I have the nails of death and Sheol. That's what it says in this manuscript. Anybody can go online and see this in the British Library website. You can go to my website, nehemiaswall.com, see the full text and translation of this, transcribed into modern Hebrew and translated. He says, I have the nails of death and Sheol.
The nails of death and hell, Sheol.
Yeah.
King James says keys.
The keys.
The keys.
And you got to wonder whether this is a Hebrew original or it's translated from some lost Latin or Greek text. There's something going on here. Keys, and you think, well, okay, nail is just a mistake, right? But nails, there's some association in the New Testament about nails. What's the first thing you hear about, Michael, when you hear Yeshua holding nails?
The nails that nailed him to the cross. Yeah, this is
interesting.
This
so
talks about in Colossians. Nailing the doctrines and commandments of men to the cross in his death.
So he talks about the nails of death and Sheol, and there it has keys. And I'm thinking, this is weird. This is very strange. So I look up in Jewish sources, and I find immediately two references to nails that are related to this. One reference is it talks about how people take nails, and this is 2,000 years ago. They take nails and they bend them, and they stick them into a door and use them as a key, which is really interesting.
Bent nails as a key.
Right.
Now, I have held, Nehemiah, I've held in my hands just handfuls of 9-inch nails from the crucifixion site. This is in Wyatt's Museum when I was helping to Ron Wyatt to build his museum and to set this up. And these rusty old nails, and he said that this is what he was able to bring back from the crucifixion site in the excavation site. And these nails were bent on the ends. Bent on the ends because as they nailed them through the wrist and through the feet of the people, then they would bend them over with the hammers, bend them over. So they're literally bent nails that could be the same as the keys.
Right, and you could actually go to the Israel Museum, and there's this is the only time it's ever been found in archaeology. They found an ankle bone with a nail through it at a place called Givat HaMivtar. It's at the Israel Museum. It's not from Yeshua. It's from a man whose name was Chag Kol. We don't know much about him, but we know he was crucified. And you see there the exact same thing. The nail is bent on the end so that this guy Chag Kol wouldn't pull his leg out. Right? He's stuck in the cross. And it's actually the only other example we know from archaeology of a person being crucified with nails, but there it is. Some poor innocent Jew who was murdered by the Romans, crucified. Now, the Hebrew version, Sloan 273 in the British Library, has nails. The Greek, every Greek text has keys. and we find out that people would turn nails and use them as keys, and we find this can't be a coincidence, Michael.
Right.
Something's going on here with these texts, and there we have the Hebrew opens up another dimension that we're not seeing in the Greek. One other reference I found, Michael, which is really cool.
And the nails of death and the grave.
Right. So what does that mean?
Grave.
So what does it mean? He has the nails of the keys of death and Sheol, or the nails. Look, this is coming from the Jewish perspective, reading a Hebrew text. It's pretty clear to me what he's saying is what Isaiah talks about, that death is going to be defeated. He's going to overthrow and destroy Sheol, right? And when the end times comes, people aren't going to die anymore. And what he's saying is, I've got the keys to get you out of death and Sheol. I think that's what he's saying.
That's
powerful stuff, really powerful, and it's nails here. Wow. So what are the keys? According to the Hebrew Sloan 273 in the British Library, they're the nails of the crucifixion. That's cool stuff. Wow. I mean, this is heavy stuff, Michael. This is really cool. There's a lot going on
You'd
here.
never see it in just reading the King James or the Greek.
Right, you'd never find that.
Just in the Hebrew.
And so the Hebrew opens up a new dimension, and whether it's the Hebrew original or like Darby said, and what Miles Jones is seeming to discover in the Catalan Hebrew Gospels is maybe these things were translated from some lost Greek or Latin, but we're getting information here that is missing in the Greek. I mean, this is an important area of research, Michael, and it breaks my heart. I want to share a story of something that happened. We're running out of time, but I got to share this story. So I was, doing this, so T-Bone's pestering me. Let's look for New Testament stuff. Let's look for New Testament stuff. And I tell him about that Hebrew Sloan 273, which I had known about for over 15 years. And I just couldn't find it. And within 1 hour, he finds it on the British Library website. And again, it's what's happened in the last year.
The
worldwide digitization project has changed the world. We can now access this document. Now, there was one document that was not online. I want to show this to people. This has never been publicly shown before.
Okay.
This document, this is a brand new discovery that turns out, and I'd known about this for years, I just didn't have access to it. It turns out there's a manuscript in Dublin, at a library in Dublin, and here we are about to see it. So this is it. And this is, now Sloan 273, Michael, is chapter 1, and it breaks off in the middle of chapter 2 of the book of Revelation. The rest of the book of Revelation continues here in chapter 2 in this manuscript from Dublin, in Hebrew. So no one's ever seen this?
No one's ever seen
No
this
one's
before.
seen this before
I haven't
in
even
public.
seen this before.
This is a Hebrew manuscript of the book. Now, is this a Hebrew original or translated from Greek? I don't know. I haven't even had time to study it. I'm looking for my 1,000 instances of Yehovah. But what's really interesting about this is I took this to a scholar in Israel who is probably the top expert in the world about Hebrew manuscripts in general. And I said, there's no record of this manuscript in any of the databases in Israel. I have on this flash drive photos. I want to give this to you. I had to contact the library in Dublin and say to them, hey, I'm looking for this manuscript. They said, well, that doesn't exist. Oh, you mean this other manuscript? In other words, I had the wrong reference number. And so they discovered that through great research, these wonderful people in Dublin found the correct reference number and then were able to send me photographs. I bought these photographs from them and I took them to this scholar in Israel and said, would you please catalog this so that everybody else knows about this, right? I don't want to keep it as a secret. Mm-hmm. And this hasn't been digitized. It's not online. People who are seeing this on their television screens are seeing it for the first time. This scholar in Israel says to me, well, I would need high-resolution TIFFs in order to digitize this. I said, I have high-resolution TIFFs. They're right here on this flash drive. And then the scholar responds and says, that's New Testament stuff, isn't it? We don't really care about that. And I thought, wow. For years I've had this sneaking suspicion, this theory, that the reason people aren't studying these texts is because the Jews who are experts in Hebrew don't care about them, and the Christians who are experts in Greek are, first of all, invested in the Greek.
Yeah,
and they don't have the Hebrew expertise. Yeah. And it was confirmed in some way by this scholar saying to me, oh, that's just New Testament stuff. That's just Christian stuff. What do you mean this is a Hebrew document that nobody else knows about? I want the world to know about it. And the way to get it known about is to put it in the catalog so any scholar can find this. And they wouldn't do it. And so it's not just a theory anymore. That these I call this we call this in Hebrew, it's fallen between the chairs, or in English you say it falls between the cracks, right? It's missed because it's like, in a sense, interdisciplinary, right? You've got the Hebrew experts and the New Testament experts, and they're generally different people and have different interests, right? They're not interested in the same thing, but this should be important. And look, there's one manuscript that I got from the Cambridge University. This was a manuscript that was very difficult to get. It wasn't digitized. They wanted $750 for the photos. I paid it. Get the photos, and I, within an hour of studying it, could tell you 100%, number one, this is a manuscript translated from Greek, and number two, it really has no value as a Hebrew text, because it just was a straight translation from Greek. It's not like these other things we're talking about. So did I waste $750? Absolutely not. Now I know that manuscript is a dead end, and I also have something to compare these other manuscripts to. I know what a Greek translation sounds like now, a pretty bad Greek translation, right? So it was a very important research. I mean, this is what happens in research. Sometimes you hit a dead end, but that dead end is important too. When
even the dead ends are expensive.
Well, they're expensive too. Well, it kind of reminds me in the Siloam tunnel, in Hezekiah's tunnel in Jerusalem. It's an ancient water tunnel that they dug in order to bring water into the city of Jerusalem during the Assyrian siege. And it's mentioned in Isaiah and it's mentioned in Kings. And what they did is they dug from two different ends, and it's S-shaped, and they met in the middle. Well, what you see as you're walking through this tunnel are what the archaeologists call false starts. So they dig, and then they're going in this direction. They realize, that's the wrong direction. So they go back, and they're digging through solid limestone with iron axes and adze, and then they, so it's kind of like a false start, and you realize, okay, that's not the direction we need to go. Let's back up a little bit and go in the other direction, right? And there's a lot of false starts. But without those false starts, they would have never found their way. So what I've come to the conclusion after years of study is, finding the answer as no is not a bad thing. I don't need the answer always to be yes. I don't need every manuscript to be the most important manuscript in the world. I just want to know the truth. And whatever that truth is, I know it will set me free. It will set me free. Can I get an amen, Michael?
Amen.
The truth will set you free. So can I read to you from, just really quickly, you mentioned before James was an epistle written in Hebrew to the 12. I just want to quickly read to you from the British Library, this manuscript that was in the Royal Collection, 16A2, Michtav Yaakov HaShaliach, the letter of Yaakov the Shaliach, the messenger. Amal Yaakov Eved Elohim Vadonai Yeshua HaMashiach, saith Jacob, Yaakov, the servant of God, and Lord Yeshua the Messiah, Lishnei Masar Shvatim HaMefuzarim Shalom Lachem, to the 12 tribes, peace to you. And I read that in Hebrew, and it's written in the Sephardic script, the Sephardic hand, and I got to wonder, when he sent out this letter, maybe he sent out one in Greek, and maybe he sent another one out in Hebrew, and maybe, just maybe, we don't know, this is a descendant of that manuscript that was then handed to King Henry VIII as a gift to some Jewish community that had received it. I don't know. There's all kinds of things out there, Michael, that nobody is bothering to study. Now, the thing I've been waiting now weeks to share, and I hope you're going to let me share it, is the issue of what we found in the Vatican. Can I at least set it up and tell the people what I found in the Vatican?
Okay, all right. We got a couple minutes here, and we're going to have to constrain you to come back for another program, because I want to get into the meat of these Gospels.
Okay.
But what'd you find in the Vatican?
So you'll let me read those Gospels the way I read this? I want people to hear it. I want this word to go around the world. So Michael, there I was back in the day, looking at this microfilm, and it has hundreds and hundreds of pages. And I'm finding all kinds of pages of all kinds of documents. There's a children's book, and there is a book in German. But most of these are Hebrew documents. These are the loose pages. You have the Vatican has thousands of manuscripts, and pages fall out over the centuries. And they'd find a page on the floor, they'd find it in a bookshelf, and they'd say, we don't know which one this goes to. Let's stick this in the junk box. And just century after century, they'd put pages in the junk box. And I was able to get a microfilm of everything in that junk box and look through it. And I'm looking at page, and I don't know what's in there. I'm not expecting to find anything. It's a lot of false starts, a lot of dead ends, right? But you get the false start, and you back up and you go the right direction. Well, I'm looking page after page, and there's hundreds of pages in this junk box. And all of a sudden, I come to this page, and it's a page of the Gospel of Luke in Hebrew in the Vatican. And I start reading it, and it's only 3 pages of Luke, and then it ends, and 1 page of the Gospel of John in Hebrew. Would you let me read the first line of the gospel, just the first line of the Gospel of John in Hebrew?
Okay, we've got it. Go ahead.
Then we'll get to the rest of it. And I mean, it's just such beautiful words, hearing these ancient Hebrew words. It starts out.
Oh, here it is. It's got the Vatican seal.
It has the Vatican seal. It says Biblioteca Apostolica Vaticana, all rights reserved. And but I believe that the rights of this document belong to the world. Habsorah hakdosha shel Yeshua HaMashiach kefi Yochanan. The holy good news gospel of Yeshua HaMashiach according to Yochanan. And then it says, Bereshit haya hadavar. In the beginning was the word. And I'm going to stop there and save the rest for next time.
Okay, all right.
It's amazing.
Well,
seeing it in Hebrew, the same word as in Genesis 1:1, Bereshit, in the beginning. Bereshit haya hadavar. In the beginning was the word.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have to come back next week for the Gospel of Luke and a little bit more of John, and we got some other treats for you that we've been waiting for decades to be able to share with you. And as Papias said, that Matthew wrote his words, collected the works in the Hebrew language, and many did their best to translate it. But now we have got the Hebrew Matthew, which has solved so many problems. And without those problems being solved, I could never have published the chronological Gospels, because my goal was to solve all of the apparent contradictions in the Gospels. It took me 38 years to do it, and the final piece to the puzzle, Nehemia provided. And without that detail, this would, a lifetime work, I would never have published it because I hadn't solved all the problems yet. And so we're going to have Nehemia back next week to join us on Shabbat Night Live, to bring us right straight from the Vatican junk box some of the greatest treasures that have ever been unearthed on planet Earth. So, Nehemia, would you please close in prayer?
Yes. Yehovah Avinu Shabbat Shemaim, Yehovah our Father in heaven, thank you so much for letting me be alive today in this period when knowledge is increasing, as it says in Daniel 12. Yehovah, that period of knowledge increasing, we see that as the time of the coming of your messenger, of the Messiah. May that be soon. May he sit soon on the throne of David here on earth and bring peace to the world. In your holy name, Yehovah. Amen.
Amen. Shabbat Shalom, Torah fans. Shavua Tov. Have a good week, and we will see you right back here for the rest of the story as we delve into the Vatican junk box on Shabbat Night Live. Lehitrot. Bye-bye.
you.